Monster Hunter Rise is one of the most user-friendly Monster Hunter games out there, but if you want to take on the toughest content effectively, you're going to need builds fit for taking on the deadly monsters. So I'm Darcblade with some awesome builds for the Greatsword in Monster Hunter Rise. Now these builds are sets that I personally like to use in the game. They may not be the most meta out there, but they are aimed to take on the majority of hunts Monster Hunter Rise has to offer. For this series I'll be featuring between 3 and 4 builds for each of the various weapons. Now when it comes to the Greatsword, it's got a little bit of love when it comes to Monster Hunter Rise. Whilst yes, it still maintains the essence of the Greatsword that is found throughout the Monster Hunter series, as in it's a weapon that can hit very hard, but has slow attacks. These slow attacks as well as slow movement speed have been alleviated slightly thanks to some of the new switch moves and silkbind attacks which factor into the various builds I use. But regardless of how you like to use the Greatsword, at the end of the day it's going to be one of the hardest hitting weapons in the game. So the first build I use is the Raw Attack Greatsword build. This is a bog standard build that has all the essential DPS skills with a few quality of life skills that you would want on the Greatsword. It's also a raw attack focused build, as with most Greatsword builds, so it can be used against pretty much any monster in the game. So for this you'll need the Kaiser Crown, the Anjanath Mail S, Valstrax Bracers, the Anjanath Coil S and the Hunter's Greaves S. As for the Petalace, I'm using the Absolute Petalace, but this can be down to personal preference to be honest. And for the Talisman, again this depends on how lucky you are. The Talisman I'm using is only a Thunderous Talisman, but nonetheless it has attack boost at level 3, which I needed for this build unfortunately, and a level 1 decoration slot. As for my weapon, I'm using the Dark of Night, which is the Nagakuka Greatsword. This some people may cringe at because it does have very low raw attack, but the high affinity combined with crit boost as well as the other affinity base skills we're using means that we should be critting all the time. This also has an attack boost rampage skill attached to it. Now when it comes to the decorations, you've got a few to play around with here. So I've gone for Tenderizer Jaws to max out weakness exploit, Steadfast Jaws to max out stun resistance, Grinder Jaws to max out speed sharpening, Critical Jaws to max out crit boost, a Charger Jaw to max out the focus skill, and finally a Brace Jaw for a point in flinch free. So if you've done what I've done here, you'll have a build with a raw attack of 231 with no element. You have white sharpness with 50% base affinity, which can easily be 100% when you take into account weakness exploit and you're attacking monster weak points. And you have a strong defense of 455 that is strong against fire, neutral against dragon, but unfortunately weak to the other elements, especially water. Now when it comes to the switch skills, normally in these videos I say they are down to personal preference, and that is true at the end of the day. But with the Greatsword I tend to switch out the switch skills for certain builds. For example, the build I'm using here is based on the True Charge Slash. A lot of hunters prefer the Rage Slash, which helps when it comes to timing monster attacks, but it can be risky because it means you have to be hit in order for you to deal maximum damage. With the True Charge Slash that isn't the case, and you're able to hit a monster hard so long as you're timing your attacks correctly. So when it comes to the skills, first of all you have attack boost at level 7. Attack boost is a skill that increases the raw attack of a build, and at level 4 or above it also gives us a percentage increase to that said attack boost. You also have Critical Eye at level 3, increasing the base affinity of a build. You have Crit Boost at level 3. Crit Boost is a skill that increases the damage of our attacks so long as they crit a monster. However, this multiplier only applies to the raw portion of an attack, not the elemental portion. You also have Weakness Exploit level 3. Weakness Exploit is a skill that grants us increased affinity so long as we're attacking monster weak points. Weakness Exploit at level 3 can potentially provide us a bonus 50% extra affinity. You also have Focus level 3, which is kind of essential quality of life skill for the Greatsword, especially if you're using the True Charge Slash attack, which basically allows you to charge up your charged slashes more quickly. You also have Stun Resistance level 3, negating all stun effects on our hunter. This is a quality of life and defensive skill. You have Speed Sharpening level 3, which allows us to sharpen our weapon incredibly quickly, which means that we're able to get back that small portion of white sharpness quite effectively. You have Marathon Runner level 1. This is a byproduct of the armor we're wearing. It's not that useful to be honest on the Greatsword. Marathon Runner is a skill that basically reduces stamina consumption when we're using stamina consumption moves. For example, like when we're sprinting. You have Flinch Free level 1, which is a result of the Brace Jaw. Flinch Free is a skill that is kind of essential when playing in a group as it prevents minor knockbacks, which include both knockbacks from monsters and your fellow allies. And then finally you have Dragonheart level 1. Dragonheart is another byproduct of the armor we're wearing. This build isn't really built around the Dragonheart skill. Basically, Dragonheart at level 1, when our health hits 50% or lower, will contract Dragon Blight, but it will also increase all our elemental resistances by 30, so it can be useful in some respects when it comes to defense. But there we have it, that is the raw attack greatsword build I'd recommend. As you can see, it is a pretty standard, straightforward DPS build for the greatsword, having all the DPS skills we would want, as well as some quality of life ones. But every build out there has pros and cons, even the best of the best ones. The biggest pros for this build is its high damage output. Even though the raw attack on the weapon we're using, the Nagakuga Greatsword, isn't the greatest, thanks to the crit boost as well as the affinity based skills we are using, it means our attacks are going to be hitting quite hard. On top of that, this build comes with white sharpness, and thanks to the way the Greatsword attacks, as in its attacks are slow, so you won't be hitting a monster that often, but when you do hit it will be hard, it means that that white sharpness remains active for longer than if we were using a faster weapon. And then finally for the pros is that this build can be used against pretty much any monster. As this is a raw attack build, it means that we don't have to worry about elemental or element resistances on the monsters we are hunting, so you can use this build against whoever you wish. But of course there are cons. One of the biggest cons is that if you want to get the stats featured in this build on this video, then unfortunately this build does kind of rely on you getting a decent talisman. And the other con for this build, which to be honest is more of a con for the greatsword in general, but for this build specifically, as we are using the true charge slash, which is timing is everything. You need to time your attacks correctly in order to hit the monsters as hard as possible. But once you get more used to monster movements, you've played the game a lot more, then this build will work wonders for you. As I said, it can be used against any monster, so it can see you through pretty much any challenge that Monster Hunter Rise has to offer. Which brings us on to the next build, which is the Resentment Greatsword build, also known as the Dragonheart Greatsword build. This build is all about utilising Rage Slash combined with Resentment and the Dragonheart skill. So, for this build we'll need the entire Valstrax armor set, which includes the Valstrax helm, mail, braces, coil and greaves. Again, I'm using the Absolute Petalace, and for my talisman, I'm using a talisman that has crit boost at level 1, a tier 3 decoration slot and then 2 tier 1 decoration slots. As for my weapon, I'm using the Abominable Greatsword, which is the Gosharag Greatsword that has an affinity boost rampage skill. You can use other greatswords if you so wish, but the raw attack on this greatsword rivals that of other raw greatswords in the weapon tree, despite being a nice weapon. But anyway, as for the decorations, you've got a fair few to play around with, so I've gone for critical jaws to max out crit boost, fervor jaws to max out resentment, steadfast jaws to max out stun resistance, charger jaws to max out focus, brace jaw to put a point in flinch free, and finally a diversion jaw for a point in the diversion skill. So if you've done what I've done here, you'll have a build with 245 raw attack with 20 ice rating. You also have blue sharpness with negative 11% affinity. This will be 39% affinity when you take into account weakness exploit. You'll also have a very strong defense rating of 531, that is strong, exceedingly strong against dragon, but unfortunately weak to the other elements. And then, like I said, when it comes to the switch skills, this build is built around Rage Slash, to be honest. That's because the skills we are using benefit Rage Slash more than True Charge Slash, so that's something to be aware of. So as for the skills, first of all you have Resentment at level 5. Resentment is a skill that gives us increased raw attack whenever we have a portion of red health on our health bar. So you can see that when we're using Rage Slash, when we're preparing the attack, we take the hit from the monster, which will leave a portion of red health on our health bar. Resentment will kick in, plus the buff that we actually get from Rage Slash for taking a hit from a monster. Then that follow-up attack will have severely increased damage applied to it. Anyway, we'll also have Dragonheart at level 5. Dragonheart at level 5 is slightly different to what we talked about in the previous build. At level 5, the Dragon Blight kicks in when our health reaches 80% or lower. This will increase our elemental resistances to 50, and on top of that we'll also gain a 10% increase to our attack power. So this also works in unison with Rage Slash and Resentment. Next up is Resuscitate at level 3. Resuscitate is a skill that whenever we have a ailment or blight on our hunter, such as Dragon Blight, will gain increased raw attack. So again, it works in unison with Dragonheart, Resentment and Rage Slash. Next up is Critical Boost at level 3. Critical Boost doesn't really have to be level 3 on this build in all honesty, because we have such low affinity. Yes, we can have positive affinity when we're attacking monster weak points thanks to weakness exploit, which will overall increase our damage, but nonetheless you can drop some critical decorations if you so wish for something else that suits your playstyle. Anyway, you have weakness exploit at level 3, focus at level 3, stun resistance at level 3, flinch free at level 1, and diversion at level 1. Diversion is a skill that allows you to draw the monster's attention more than your allies around you. So the monster should be attacking us more than our teammates, unless they have diversion as well. But why would we want to do this? Well, this is because we want the monster to hit us when we're charging up our Rage Slash so we can get the increased damage. So there we have it, that is the Resentment build. As you can see, all the skills work well in unison with one another. They strongly benefit the rage slash playstyle, but it could be seen as risky, which brings us onto the pros and cons. The biggest pro for this build is its strong damage output. Thanks to all the skills complementing one another, we're able to hit monsters incredibly hard with this build so long as we time our rage slashes correctly. On top of that, this build also can be used against pretty much any monster in the game. Because we contract Dragon Blight, it nullifies the ice element on this weapon, meaning that we only have to really worry about raw attack, and thus we can take this build against any monster. And the other pro for this build, which is more of a pro for the playstyle more than anything else, which is this is a tanky build, meaning that you're able to take monster hits, not have them knock you back, and you're allowed to continue your assault. This is thanks to us using not only Rage Slash, but also the Adamant Charge Slash as well. But of course there are cons, two major cons for this build to be honest. Firstly, you're going to have to lower your health in order to activate Dragonheart, which is a con in itself, and on top of that the other con, which is more of a con linked to Rage Slash, which is you have to put yourself at risk in order to hit the monster as hard as possible. So this is something to be aware of when using this build, but if done right, if you keep an eye on your health or if you have a support ally in your hunting party, this build can work wonders, able to hit monsters incredibly hard regardless of their resistances and defenses. Which brings us on to our third and final build, which is the Budget Greatsword build. Now in this series, budget builds are constructed from full armor sets, so there are no mix sets when it comes to the budget builds here. These are just basically sets that you can craft from one monster, one mid-game monster that should allow new hunters to the game. These builds can also work quite well at endgame as well, so that's something to be aware of. So with the Greatsword budget build, I would strongly recommend going for the Anjanath armor set, which includes the Anjanath Helm S, Mail S, Fan Braces S, Coil S and Greaves S. Again, when it comes to the Petalace, I'm using the Absolute Petalace, but this can be down to personal preference as always. And for the Talisman, try to get something with Weakness Exploit on it. I'm using a Talisman that has Weakness Exploit level 1, and then a tier 2 decoration slot and a tier 1 decoration slot. As for the weapon, I recommend Dark of Night again, which is the Nagakuga Greatsword, that has an attack boost rampage skill attached to it. So when it comes to the decorations, you've got a few to play around with, although to be honest, remember this is a budget build, so we're not going to have some of the rarest decorations out there, but if you can get them, I'd recommend Attack Jaws, Steadfast Jaws, Grinder Jaws, and then finally Tenderizer Jaws to max out Weakness Exploit. So if you've done what I've done here, you'll have a build with 231 attack, with no element. You have white sharpness again with 35% base affinity, which can be 85 when you take into account weakness exploit as well. You have a decent defense of 431 that is strong against fire and dragon, but unfortunately weak to the other elements. As for the switch skills, as we have been using specific switch skills for the other two builds, when it comes to this one, it's down to personal preference. When it comes to the skills though, if you've done what I've done here, you'll have attack boost at level 7, weakness exploit at level 3, focus at level 3, marathon runner at level 3. Again, this is a byproduct of the armor we're wearing. It's not that useful when it comes to the greatsword. Yes, it helps when it comes to us sprinting around the map, but that's about it. You'll also have slugger at level 3. Slugger is a skill that increases the stun power of our attacks. Overall, it makes it easier to stun a monster, especially if we're using the tackle attack with the greatsword. You'll also have stun resistance level 3, and finally you'll have speed sharpening at level 3. So as you can see, that is pretty much the budget build, straightforward, to the point, and it has all the essential skills you would want on the greatsword, especially focus. Focus definitely is useful when you're going through the game, and is one of the main reasons we're using the Anjanath armor here. But even budget builds have pros and cons. One of the biggest pros for this build is its decent raw attack. Having attack boost maxed out combined with a few affinity based skills such as weakness exploit, we're able to take on monsters quite effectively. On top of that, this build can be used once again against any monster in the game, thanks to it not really having an element, so we don't have to take into account monster elements or ailments. And then finally is that for a budget build, this build comes with quite a few quality of life skills. From focus to slugger, stun resistance and more, these all help add to a quality of a hunt, making it feel easier than it is. But unfortunately there are cons. One of the biggest cons is that unfortunately to get weakness exploit it kind of relies on decorations or talismans. And the other con is, once again, which is more of a con for the greatsword overall, which is, again, timing is everything when it comes to this weapon. But if you're looking for a build to get through Monster Hunter Rise with, I'd recommend this one for the greatsword. So there we have it, those are some of the builds I like to use for the greatsword in Monster Hunter Rise. Now these builds are aimed to be general builds, able to take on pretty much any task in the game. They may also differ slightly from other meta builds found in the community, and of course can change depending on what talismans you have available to you. But regardless, these are some of the builds that I personally like to use, and I hope they help you out in your hunts. So until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing some awesome builds for the Greatsword in Monster Hunter Rise. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.